You're muted.
Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. This is our 51 episode, and we will discuss on what could the AI failure look like. We have our very famous speaker for today's session, Mr. Moses Ma, Mr. Rob Enderley, and Mr. Sharidan Tatsuna. I believe that today's session will be very interesting because of all of the subject matter expert joining to the sessions. I request all of our universities, those who collaborate with World Talent Economy Forum, university grant commissions from around Asia Pacific, please share today's concept. Hopefully it will be very interesting. Mr. Moses Ma, what you want to discuss about today's session? We have question from audience. After first round, I will ask you. Mr. Moses Ma, can you unmute, please?
Hello. Hi, everybody. So today I will focus on near-term futures. We have a project that talks about mitigating the impact of job losses, which is significant. And I look forward to the conversation about the far future as well. We have a number of projects in those areas that are really exciting. The main idea I have to share is that right now, Gen AI looks like a 10x improvement. As humans figure it out and the technology matures, it becomes a 100 to 1000x improvement that significantly changes things, making it very difficult to predict what the future will look like. Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you. Professor Rob, what you want to discuss for today's session?
Sure. Clearly, as we're talking about the future post-AI, we're talking about a fundamental difference between the way that people interface with machines. As we came up through the various ages, and the computer age and PC ages in particular, we moved from terminals, we moved to PCs, eventually to smartphones, and now we're talking about AI. And with AI, at least the current generation of AI computers, we're mostly working with are conversational in nature. They use large language models. The interface changes, and much as we moved from terminals and command line interfaces in the 80s and 90s to GUIs, the change to this interface is going to be significant, and likely more significant than we saw in the prior generations. The reason for that is up till now in this current generation is people had to learn how to work with computers. There was training involved. You had to learn languages. If you wanted to create something, you needed to be a coder. Well, right now, Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, says, if you're going into coding, you're wasting your time. Computer's going to do that, and so we get in the future, a lot of the tasks that we currently do with our machines and interface with them will be different. We'll be talking to the machines, and they'll be doing the jobs, and often they'll be talking to each other. In other words, the removing humans from the mix entirely, going to full autonomy, is already being explored in certain verticals like fast food, where you just run up and instead of talking to somebody, the whole thing's a big vending machine, and everything that's done inside is done automatically. And recognize at the same time, we're doing things like replacing drivers and vehicles, whether they be commercial vehicles or actual cars, with robotics as well. And so we face what is, I think, kind of an interesting future, because a lot of this robotic and AI development, and we already have with Devlin an AI programmer that's being marketed. With all this development is the AI is being focused on jobs that are hard to fill. And one of the hardest jobs to fill are the new jobs that are being created by the AI wave. And so unlike prior industrial ages where the new jobs were filled by retrained people, in this age, the new jobs appear to be being filled by trained AIs, because they can't get the people to fill them. And that driving element means that this particular revolution is going to be very different. And if we're not careful, we're going to end up with an awful lot of people that are not only unemployed, but unemployable. So resolving that difficulty, whether that be through universal general income, universal basic income, or some other method, is going to be a problem we're going to have to deal with in the future. Now, as we talk about the skills that we need to develop to work with that future, interestingly enough, a lot of them are going to be conversational. Much like we discovered when the web was developed and you had to learn Boolean logic, we're going to have to learn how to articulate what it is we want. One of the jokes that's floating around the industry, my industry right now, is coders have nothing to worry about because a user is going to have to articulate what they want, and they've never been able to articulate what they want. That's not just funny; it's actually kind of true. And the difficulty right now we've got is most of us cannot articulate what it is we want, and particularly if we want something created out of bare cloth. You have to be able to describe the full end point of what it is that you want the AI to complete. Otherwise, it's going to fill the gaps. And as it gets smarter and learns more about you, it's going to be more successful at filling those gaps. But at this particular point in time, we need to be very specific. Now I'll move on after this because we want to go down the rotation. The other thing we're going to have in an AI future is we're going to have digital humans. We're going to have the underlying concept of entities that are, whether we're talking about game NPCs interacting with you for entertainment, we're talking about digital employees. Those are going to be very real elements. And some of those digital employees will be digital twins of the people that created them. And so we're going to have an interesting mix of people working with ground up AIs and robots and people that are either supplemented or eventually replaced by human virtual twins. And that's going to create some really interesting and perhaps troubling. And we've already seen this to a certain extent with the virtual women that have appeared already on the web, the virtual dates that have appeared on the web. Most of these are women, and guys are doing this, so hey, for my sex. But we're already seeing those kinds of implications, and the social implications are fairly significant because a lot of guys are saying, hey, I'd rather have the digital girlfriend than a real girlfriend. And if that goes off the rails, we're going to have some real issues with reproduction and maintaining populations. So a lot of interesting stuff hitting us in the future. And as we come back around, I'll talk about a little bit about what the world may have to look like to make it all work. And I'll pass to Sheridan.
Okay, very good. I thank you. You both touching on all the big third rails or challenges. Okay, I'm an urban environmental planner by training, so I'm going to be looking at it on the use case and usability side, not the tech push side. So more demand side analysis. A couple of things. I wrote a book. It's called Gaiopolis Strategy, where I discuss how we use VR and some AI for climate action for sustainable city planning, because I co-founded a company in Sweden back in 2015. And we used the Unreal Gaming Engine 4.0 to develop sustainable digital twin models of Copenhagen, Malmo Port, the Lund 2070 future plan, Stockholm, new towns, and the waterfront on Malmo. So we actually worked with real cities using VR and AI for planning the future of the cities, and actually what they use that, as you know, in architecture and engineering design for actually building everything. So it's not fantasy land like Disneyland. We work from reality, VR, AI to reality, and that's the process. I'm also the CSO, Chief Strategy or Sustainability Officer for iMedis.com. We're German doctors, and we've been using AI avatars for personalized medicine since 2017, already 7 years. So all this futuristic talk, we've been doing it for the last 7 years. So it's one of the problems. I think the U.S. is kind of behind in medicine. I notice because we have a lot of regulations, they're very conservative, very slow. Whereas we noticed that in Dubai, they're pushing out way ahead. Europe's out ahead. Asia's out ahead now. Tokyo even is leapfrogging into the future faster than the U.S. because of all the regulations here in the U.S. So we're using, I guess where I would put it, the AI avatar, we call her Ava. We talk to it. She's personalized for each person. It works with the hospital system, and it's for patient care. Because let's say there are 50,000 patients, there's no way to keep track of them all. So instead, they could just talk to it, and then it records everything. It has all their data, and we have compliance officers for GDPR compliance, which is tougher than HIPAA compliance in the U.S. So we have both, and everything must be anonymized because you cannot allow personal data, medical data on the internet at all. So we do that, and we have the database, 3 types of data. We have the public data like CDC and public information. We have the hospital patient data, personalized. And then we have the new data is generated by Gen AI. So when you talk to it, it records everything you're doing. It's transcribing everything. You can do searches to find whatever you want. They do recommendations, but we always keep the doctors in the loop, the nurses in the loop. The advantage of AI is really simple. It's faster, better, and cheaper. So the doctors tell me it takes about 80% of the patients don't need to go to the hospital, which is great because, it's a half a day, hour there, hour back, and then waiting for an hour just for a 5-minute checkup. So they can do it on the phone. So 80% of the consultations are quick. They're 5-10 minutes on a phone, video. They have all the data. They pull it all, everything they've ever asked, everything that AI has told them. The doctor can see it immediately and then look it over very quickly and then say, this is what we need to do, or you need to up your prescriptions. And then they authorize it and it's shipped to you, good to go. Okay, so, and then also if you need, so we have a kind of a red, yellow, green, where if it's emergency, they send the ambulance basically and say you got it. And then if it's yellow, we think you need to come in with short-term or long-term, then you could book an appointment just like on an airplane. So you book your date, time with a doctor, and it routes you to the right people. It's set up, you just go in. So it saves people from time phoning around and setting up meetings. And then green means you're good to go, there's no problem. So what happens is kind of triage where the AI automatically triages like 50,000 patients in terms of criticality. And then what happens is the doctors, for let's say 500 patients, there's no way to track them all. They can see the criticality for all their patients and when they're coming in. And so it's just, AI is just really fast, cheaper, and easier to do. Our doctors actually say they make more money using AI than face-to-face. And the reason is that you can only see 3 or 4 patients. I'm sorry, our dog. 3 or 4 patients an hour because you have to set up meetings. Whereas the AI, you can just go real fast, like 5 minutes each, and you can see 10, 15 patients. So they make more money on AI in Germany, which doesn't pay that much. So I think one of the things is that it's very practical. Now, as for replacing doctors and surgeons, that's a no-no. And the reason is that, as you've seen, and our doctors have told us again, that it hallucinates. It puts out false positives, false negatives, which is dangerous in health, which means you can die. So whenever there's a question and it's called on risk factors, then automatically they'll say yellow, and then the doctor comes in, the nurses come in, the people, the specialists will come in, look at the data, and then you can talk to the patient. So we always keep the doctor in the loop. And that's really important because otherwise you end up with these dumb robots that misdiagnosing. And then the big reason why they do it, obviously, is that legal liability and financial liability. And this is what people don't talk about. I don't know why they don't think about it, but if you misdiagnose and you ignore the patient, they die, you are legally responsible because you are responsible for the health of the safety of your patient. So instead of AI being a block so you can't get in, like, those phone bots, the goal is to alert it. So it says, if there's any questions, come in, and then therefore avoid a death or, and then a lawsuit, which could be pretty big. So I think we're going to see the legal profession cracking down pretty hard on the use of AI because of legal liability. And most doctors are very, very alert to that. So I think, so for most enterprise areas, whether it's construction, architecture, engineering, designing, car designing, healthcare, I can tell you, safety is the #1 factor. If you do not do that and your bridge collapses or your building collapses, your house collapses or your car crashes like these robots or your patient dies, you are legally liable, and that could be a career-ending move and a company-ending move because of the negative PR. So I think people need to understand that it's not just some stupid machine you just do and it does everything for you. It's really dumb in a way. And so in computer science, they say garbage in, garbage out. If you put in garbage, you're going to get garbage out, and you're liable. legally liable. So I think what we see is that you must have domain expertise, whether it's construction engineer, whatever, or plumbing, and then you use AI to assist you, but not override you, because again, the human is liable, right? And I think that's really, really important to emphasize, that you just don't let the robots go wild. But anyway, that's pretty much what I'd like to say.
Thank you. My first questions to Professor Modesma: how might advancement in artificial intelligence impact employment opportunity in various industries in the future?
Wow. There was a research report released at the World Economic Forum that predicted that 85 million jobs would be impacted or lost in the next 2 years. If that's true, that's roughly 2 to 3 times the impact of COVID. And the biggest issue is that COVID was a temporary exogenic shock to the colony, and we've survived because in the last few months, every job that was lost to COVID has been made up. Uh, Jobs lost to AI, I would say 70 to 80% of them are going to be lost forever. And the problem is that the political situation is that half of the world seems to be uh, all for basic income and support and social net. And the other half are what I call the F your feelings crowd. And they're like not wanting to spend anything on social network infrastructure. So I think there's going to be a big fight before anything like universal basic income arrives. But yes, I think it'll affect almost every industry. Um, One of the jokes we have is that unfortunately AI is taking all the good jobs. It's like becoming a musician, it's becoming a filmmaker. It's not doing any of the really crummy jobs. So our company is working on taking over some of the crummier jobs. For example, uh, it would be great if you just tell an autonomous bot, go make money for me, and it just made money. That's the kind of vision that we have, is that you could use AI to generate money based on what you know and what you do, um, and actually automate some of that process so that it becomes a profit center for you that could generate your own basic income. Anyway, that's what I have to share. How about the rest of you guys?
Professor Rob.
Yeah. So the some interesting things with regard to employment, and Sheridan is right. At least right now, trusting AI to do everything would be a mistake. We've got lots of issues with regard to training set validity and problems, and introducing bad data into the training set, which is resulting in bad outcomes. And we saw that early on, a decade ago, when Microsoft tried to use chatbots on search. The chatbot got corrupted. We ended up with a racist Nazi chatbot after a very short period of time, which wasn't great for PR. But that gets fixed. I mean, the thing is, we are in the very early stages of AI. We thought as little as a year ago that AGI was probably 15 years out. Now it looks like it's closer to 3 years out. So things are moving really fast, and faster than we can really wrap our heads around. I mean, we're used to technology advancements that take place over decades. This technology advancement is taking place over months, way faster than we're capable of absorbing, and that's going to create some rare, really major problems going forward. One of them is if you're starting in school now, what do you study for? I mean, there's a pretty good chance by the end of this year, your career dynamic's going to change, let alone by the end of 4 years, or go to a graduate degree 6 or 8. So the difficulty you've got right now is you've got a lot of moving parts. I mean, just an incredible lot of moving parts. As Sheridan pointed out, a lot of the work's being done right now in more advanced companies like Siemens or NVIDIA or the rest is being done in virtual reality and through heavy AI simulation, down to the people. When you lay out the plan for a new warehouse or a new factory, in many cases that factory is built virtually first, along with digital twins of the people, not digital twins of the real people yet, but digital twins of people. So you can see how the equipment, how the operations will interact if you introduce humans into the mix, and make sure that any injuries are virtual, not real. And then you keep the two elements tied so that you can remotely maintain the new virtual, or excuse me, the real project that has been virtually emulated. And then you can do things like you can test in the emulated environment as opposed to having to test on the real environment. So if you want to introduce a new piece of equipment, you want to introduce a new set of robots, or whatever, you do that in simulation using something like Omniverse. And you don't do that on the factory floor, which is how we used to do it. I mean, the way we used to spin up hardware in automated factories is you do tests with the real hardware. You had ideas of what the hardware would do. You would, and then you would you either have a test environment where you would test it, or you'd bring it into the floor and you put up a test line, and you do it that way. Not anymore, at least not on the cutting edge. Now you do all of that in virtual reality, and then when you roll it out, it's near done. You might still do some in-place testing to be sure of this, but only because you may not be yet fully confident in the AI elements. But we're talking about a time after that stuff gets settled. We're talking about we're talking post AI. We're talking about 2030s into the 2040s, and so a lot of this stuff gets settled. So even with regard to having doctors operating on you versus machines, well, we've had doctors operating on people remotely using robotics for a while. If you can't get a doctor into a particular operating theater, often that doctor is operating a piece of equipment remotely, and they've been doing that since I tested equipment back in the early 2000s that did that. It was just targeted at medical theaters, so now we're talking about there were concerns back then. What if you have a power outage? What if the network goes down mid-operation? What about the liability if this happens? Well, the trade-off was for those patients they weren't going to get any medical care if they didn't use this method. If they were used specifically in areas where you couldn't get a specialist in, and where the specialist could contact the patient remotely. And so these things tend to get fixed, and this will get fixed as well. Whether it gets fixed through redundancy, which is how we do it with the space program. We don't trust our electronics in the space program either, and so we're triple redundant. And so one of my professors in graduate school was one of the guys who worked on the space program, and he described to me the process, which made it clear I never wanted to be an astronaut. And the process is they're triple redundant, and each part has three versions of it. And each of the people doing the test, they'll test the first part, if it fails. They go to the second part, and it fails. They'll go to the third part, and it fails. They install the first part. They don't go back and reproduce the parts. They bet that the redundant systems will pick it up. But if there's an inherent defect in the parts, so everybody's three parts fail, then they don't have redundancy, they have assured failure. And that's the kind of thing that would keep you awake if you were sitting on top of several thousand tons of explosive material as an astronaut. So that was my conviction, that maybe redundancy isn't the end all be all to these kinds of problems unless you go back and actually do repairs. But be aware with automation, we can do that. The 3D printing, automated manufacturing. A lot of the reason why in the space program they do it that way is these parts are wicked expensive to make. Each one is hand milled. The amount of money that goes into creating each part. I mean, you've seen the stories of $15,000, $20,000 screwdrivers. Well, that's often because those particular tools are custom made one-offs to do a particular job, and the cost contains the amount of research and development that goes into that particular tool. You don't see it in the tool itself, but it resides behind the tool, and it's what dictated the price. But with AI, simulation and automated manufacturing and 3D printing, much of that cost goes away. And so you can now afford to go back, and if you've got triple failure, actually repair the parts and reinstitute. And that's the same thing with AI. As we approach the out years of artificial intelligence, we will have redundancies. We will be testing against that redundancies, and you won't have to have. In fact, often now in more advanced systems, you don't have people in the mix. Most of the military equipment that we're now using AI, if it loses its operator, it acts fully autonomously. It does target selection autonomously, and it strikes autonomously. Which, by the way, given the current level of AI, concerns me just a little bit. Makes me very glad I'm not on a war zone. So in the end, in the future, it'll be much more dependent. We will not need human oversight as much as we do now, and the end result still comes back to what do people do once we exceed parity. The last study that just was published, I think it was a month ago, that talked about AI capability against people on all vectors. It is now a parallel. On paper, AI is now capable of doing everything that we thought two years ago it was nowhere close to being capable of doing. From recognizing objects to making complex decisions to being able to act on information that it had not seen before. It's capable of doing it. Granted, on the cutting edge and with the same concerns in place about hallucinations. Our quality issue has not yet been addressed, but the capability of the AIs have been, and we've done this in 2 years. I mean, 2 years ago, we were nowhere near this capability. And so at the rate of advancement, there's a lot of concern. I think Musk and Gates have both gone public with deep concerns about how fast this is going and the inability we have of keeping up. Musk has gone for brain inserts, as you've probably seen. But the latest articles on that are showcasing the shortfalls because that technology is also advancing so very quickly. And so if you do a brain implant to couple somebody with a computer to make them more competitive, what do you do when that becomes obsolete? And right now it's becoming obsolete on a quarterly basis. Somebody's operating on your brain. You're not going to go back and have another brain operation 3 months from now. That's just not going to be practical. So in the end, as we get to the future, these are things we have to solve. That technology, if we're doing human machine integration, is going to have to be upgradable without invasive procedures, because otherwise your death rate is going to be too high. Not to mention the fact that any failures, many of the failures you're undoubtedly going to have as this stuff advances is going to be terminal. And so working through all of that, working through the process of upgrading, working through the levels of technology. One other thing with brain interfaces. Do you use hard materials like metals, which is what Musk is using, or do you come up with a biological construct? If you've ever looked at the consistency of a brain, it's kind of like gelatin. If you have a metal construct and you fall and hit your head and it takes like a 7G hit, what's that construct going to do to your brain? It's probably going to rip right through it. So a metal interface is probably not going to be where we're going to end up. But on the other hand, our biological skills have not advanced as quickly. And so a biological interface right now appears to be a bit over the horizon. We're working on it. But where the live testing is going on right now is with these, which I don't know how the hell they got approval for that, is with these metal constructs, which don't seem to be particularly viable for our human brain interface because of the dangers that I mentioned. Now, to be aware, these things will mostly be used for paraplegics, for people that have lost motor functions, and they will address a major problem. And those folks will probably be in wheelchairs. Their risk of falling is fairly low. But remember, all they got to do is be in a car, and the car get into an accident, and they're going to be in trouble. So working through all of that's going to be an issue. But post AI, we are undoubtedly going to have better better direct man-machine interfaces. Our human interfaces are going to be conversational, and increasingly the need for human oversight, because that's the goal of the entire effort, is going to be reduced. And if we hit our goals of AGI before 2030, which is what I think NVIDIA is projecting right now, and I think I just saw another projection last week that it brought that in even farther, then we're in, before we get to 2035, we're in for a very significant come to Jesus about what do we do with people. And I'll pass it.
Thank you. I have next questions for Professor Sharidan Tatsuno. What ethical consideration should be addressed as AI become more prevalent in society?
Can you repeat that question again? It was a little bit, okay.
There is a question in the screen. My question is, what ethical consideration should be addressed as AI become more prevalent in the society?
Okay. I think we need safeguards. Okay, so I see AI like nuclear weapons or surgery, X-rays or cars. If you want, you could have the Wild West where everything just goes crazy. But historically, we've learned that you can destroy people, kill people. So humans aren't dumb. Okay, I'll be frank. As much as AI is smart, it's stupid because it can kill without thinking accidentally. We see the AVs right now where they misdiagnose. So I think what we're going to see is really fast movement on behalf of corporations to make money as fast as they can, which is happening now. Okay, so it's going to accelerate. It's going to AGI. It's going to come faster. That's a given. Now, the question is, do we only use accelerators or do we break it all? In other words, do we have public policies, because I'm a policy wonk, to rein in? In other words, do we have cars and let people drive crazy all over the place, run red lights, whatever? Or do we have traffic rules, training, education, brakes, laws, enforcement, police, fines, everything? And I believe that if we're wise as humans and we just like nuclear armaments, we will have nuclear treaties and agreements. That's the only way we could stop the madness of unrestrained AI. All right, and so I think the human's going to have to come into it, not necessarily on operational level, the tactical level. All that stuff can be totally automated. All right, and in fact, if you look at farming, it's a good example. In the past, 60-70% of people worked on farms, and then automation came in, and now maybe less than 1% of humans worked on farms, and they said, woe is us, we're going to be totally unemployed forever because there's no farms. Well, guess what? We moved to factories and offices, and we created new types of jobs at higher levels of thinking. So today's farms are practically automated, but we have all these systems. So we're going to automate. We're going to remove the human from all this hands-on stuff and then go to a higher level. But the higher levels could be controlled by policies and guidelines. They have to be, otherwise you end up with I call it the Wild West, the Mad Max world, where everything's totally destructive. And I don't think people will tolerate that at all. So that said, now we've already been there in terms of jobs. In fact, 10 years ago, I spoke with a lawyer in San Francisco, and I said, someday AI is going to eliminate legal jobs. And he says, it's already done. It's already happening. I said, what are you talking about? He said, didn't you know? And I said, no, what? He said, LexisNexis is eliminating 80% of the legal jobs. I said, what do you mean? He goes, in the past, we hired 10 to 12 lawyers for very complex discovery on complex corporate, big class action suits. Today, we only need 2. Redundancy. And I said, 2. Why do you? So he said, that's the reason why we're not hiring new college grads, because we don't need them. We only have experienced attorneys working with LexisNexis, and we could do the same amount of work faster, better, cheaper. And I said, so that means the end of the legal profession goes wrong. And he said, think about it. What's to prevent the other 10 lawyers from going and starting their own law firm and using the same LexisNexis against us? And by the way, their overhead's much cheaper. They could charge a third of us because they don't have the overhead and offer the same level of quality of law. So his prediction, and it's already happened if you've studied law, the legal profession, in the last 10 years, we've seen a proliferation of small mom and pop boutique law firms, fewer big firms, and the firms aren't growing that fast, or they're laying off to cut costs. And so it's really, there's an explosion of legal entrepreneurship. So what I think is going to happen with AI, the ultimate, is that there's going to be massive layoffs in corporations as they downsize and cut their costs. We're seeing it already. India is going to get hammered by the collapse of the software industry. But I don't think Indians are going to take it lying down. I think they're all going to be like the lawyers who couldn't get jobs at big law firms. Are going to say, wait a minute, we could use the same tools to do our own business. So why do we need the big corporations? So what we're going to see, and this is why the world talent economy is very important, is that the number one rule to survival is going to be entrepreneurship. In other words, you have to learn tools that you need, and then you need to apply it. However, it's like this garbage in, garbage out problem. Unless you have domain knowledge in farming or plumbing or whatever, it doesn't matter. Unless you have that, it's just zero knowledge times AI, which is total stupidity and idiocy. So you have to have some core knowledge. Now, preferably hands-on knowledge. Those are the jobs that are hard to replace, like nurses or doctors or plumbers. You need to have hands-on. So what I think is going to happen is that the weight's going to move away from the mental activities, which AGI could do, and give primacy to hands-on, face-to-face again, real things. Now, and also guidance. So people who are smart and wise who know what not to do, instead of spending 2 months using AI to do crazy stuff, they're going to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And you think it carefully. And we're going to think about the guidelines, the ethics and everything, and the legal liability and all those issues, and then forge our approach. That's what I think is going to happen. We will all, because in medicine right now, we do that already. We can't just do willy-nilly whatever we want. We have GDPR, we have HIPAA compliance, and if you cross that line, end of your career, you get delicensed. So, and once one doctor's delicensed from AI, trust me, every doctor in the world is going to be worried about their career. So I do think that we are wiser than people make us out to be, that we don't want to lose our careers, our licenses, our jobs, lives, money, in general. Because people tend to be loss adverse. They won't use the accelerator like, go fast and break it. I think those days are over. I think when I hear the word go fast and break it, it means break your career and break your company forever, because once you go over that line, it's end game. So I think we're going to see a lot more, and that's why Morgan Stanley now, they're hiring philosophy majors. So right now in tech, it's called prompting. In the academia, it's called the Socratic method. Actually thinking, asking questions, and with the context and the principles, philosophy, and all that, that's where the real value is going to be in the future. Is people are really, I call it deep thinkers or very reflective, and so thinking is going to come back into its own. So actually, the irony is AI is going to drive a huge boom in the humanities. People will actually think and feel instead of just being robots like the AI. So that's my prognosis for the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Donald, my next question to you, how could AI revolutionize healthcare? I think Sharidan also touched few of the part, and what are the potential benefit and challenges associated with this transformation?
I'll try to keep it. All right. So AI basically can personalize medicine. So it's patient-centric, not institution-centric. And the second step, we do it one-to-one right now, is group, where so you have a forum, just like we're doing now, with your family members. So your family could be in Brazil, Chile, all around the world. Right now they can't talk, but we can just bring them in together with the doctor. We do that now with video like Zoom, and we could do it. And now we're launching virtual hospitals where you use either flat panel or we're working with Apple's Vision Pro now. So you can actually be in a room with the doctor. So we mix blended reality. So we have the real doctor, real patient for the family members who are there with the patient there. And then the others could either flat panel or looking at it, can watch and talk and ask questions like they're looking over the shoulder of the doctor, even though they're in Brazil. So this whole remote, I call it collaborative medicine, where it's not just personalized anymore, but you're with your family. It's for comfort and for advice. So I think that's going to be a huge, explosive business. And it's going to require not specialists, because we already have the doctors, all right? That's not the problem. It's people who know how to moderate the collaboration, who are sensitive and caring, have ethics, and then help comfort the person and make everything better, faster, and cheaper. Because one of the problems, my daughter's a nurse, is that I can tell you, all the families freak out when their son or daughter or families in ICU, the intensive care, and they're just hysterical half the time. So one of the challenges is trying to calm them down, get them to work, and get them thinking more rationally to help the patient instead of freaking out the patient. So that's the emotions is probably going to be the biggest challenge for healthcare, is how do you manage that, the emotions, the family emotions, not the doctors, but the family emotions. And then of course you have the burnout issue. but that's another issue. I'm not where it's more about meditation and relaxation, things like that. But that's not for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Mr. Donald, what you want to discuss for today's session? Can you hear me? Mr. Donald, can you hear me?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry, my main computer for some reason was just not connecting to Facebook. And so I'm using my phone. And of course, just when you talked to me, I got a phone call that caused it to erase you. Well, I was looking at this and I thought it was about the future. And I didn't realize it was completely about AI. I've subscribed to a journal called, what is it? It's not the AMA, it's the New England Journal of Medicine AI journal. It's got a journal that's specifically about using AI in medicine. And what they're doing is very specific, and it's very fraught right now. So I think that we've got a ways to go. My wife just started working at she's a primary care nurse practitioner. So she's almost like a family nurse practitioner. She's almost like a doctor. And she prescribes medicine and does procedures and the whole bit. And so she just started working at One Medical, which is Amazon. And I would suspect that one of the first places that they'd start using these artificial intelligence thing would be at some place like that, because Bezos is, pretty into squeezing as much out of his labor as he possibly can, and they're not using it at all. And so I think that if we look at medicine, for an instance, I checked, and the Watson project really did fail and close. IBM was not successful at the medical trying to turn Watson into a doctor. It didn't work. I have several articles and papers that show that it failed. And so we tend to overblow what AI really does. I think people don't understand it very well. It's having a huge impact, but we have to be realistic about where that impact is. For instance, I just read an interesting article by a college professor who said she won't let her students use Grammarly. Well, Grammarly isn't AI, or the AI that it has in it is just there to, make sure you've got all your words in the sentence, and you're not, doing something grammatically ridiculous or spelling things wrong. That's all it does. It doesn't write anything for you. But of course, ChatGPT does. So she banned Grammarly, and the reason is using Grammarly, your writing becomes sort of robotic. And it's interesting that Grammarly would certainly not approve of James Joyce. I mean, the way he writes, he makes up words. He writes in incredible run-on sentences and things like that. So anyway, the point simply being is that the teacher said she can spot something that's done by AI immediately. It's not a problem. So AI, when we say it's being conversational and stuff, you have to realize it is not thinking in any way. It is just simply it took every piece of writing that it could possibly find, fed it in there, and averaged a lot of different variables. So it's not just one average of one thing, it's the average of a lot of different things. And because of that, it can predict and even generate things that it's based on things that it's seen before. It's not thinking, it's not doing that. But when I think about the future, I think what's more important is the fact that they're pretty sure that the Atlantic meridional current is about to stop. And when that stops, it could stop as early as next year. And when that stops, what's going to happen is that Europe is going to go back into an ice age, basically. They won't be able to grow crops. It will be freezing cold, and other parts of the world will get hotter. And I see it could be this year. It could be now. We're so close. It will be where we start getting heat waves in the southern part of the world, like South Asia and South America and places like that are closer to the equator, Africa, that will have wet bulb temperatures into the 90s for days and days. And if you don't have an air conditioner, you will die. And so we're talking about we will be having events where tens of millions of people are killed by the heat. More people are killed in the United States by heat than cancer or heart disease or anything else. It's very deadly. And so what's going to happen is people are going to have to leave wherever they are to survive. And right now, the world, the United States, and many other countries are sliding into authoritarian dictatorships. And part of that is based on the fear of immigrants. And the demagogues are whipping up this stuff about immigrants, even though immigrants, there was an article or paper by the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, the other day, that immigrants would add $7 trillion to our economy in the next 10 years, and over $1 trillion in tax money, which we could use to run the country. And but yet we're banning them. So I think that where AI comes into that is that anybody practically now can make suicide drones, and even they can even be run by AI now. And so what we're going to start seeing is these wars that are starting now are going to keep expanding and expanding. And they're going to be using AI technology, simple AI technology, to run drones, and basically, a lot of people are going to die. And I think that we're just years away from that happening. So, anyway, that's my guess about the future.
Mhm. Thank you, Professor Modesma.
Wow, that was very depressing. So I'll give a counterpoint to that. One is, I think we need to worry less about hackers putting human detection on drones and then sending them out like shooters. Right now you have school shootings. I can imagine that would happen, but I actually think that's not the most important thing to focus on. The most important thing to focus on is actually making sure AI doesn't annoy people. Like if you put AI into every traffic cam and have them detect who's likely to to offend in order to maximize your fines, that's actually kind of an unfair thing. You shouldn't pit humans against AIs, especially in areas that annoy people. So anything that would annoy people, there should actually be a law that stops that from happening. It's actually even more important than GDPR and privacy. It's the AI Anti-Annoyance Act that would have to come about. The other thing I wanted to mention is that a lot of people think hallucinations are always bad. They're not. Our first product is called Brainstorm Bot. It's a thing that helps you brainstorm. A hallucination is a positive. It's actually creative thinking. Like it mixes two things that don't make sense together, and it helps the human being it primes the pump of creativity. So I think that you can actually do things that optimize AI as it is now, and then they will continue. Finally, the last thing I want to mention is something that brought me a lot of hope was when Sora and other AI video products were announced, they didn't release them because they knew that these could be immediately used to copy politicians and do adverse political stuff before an election. So they're holding that back until after the election. But that actually showed a great deal of restraint because those products would make a lot of money right now. The Sora, the AI that produced by Sora and China's Vidu, uh, they're so good that any small business could make a TV commercial that's worthy of the Super Bowl for about $100. Well, actually, it's not true for Sora. Sora's going to be very expensive, but there are new things coming out that use far fewer GPU boards that could create equivalent video consistency. The other thing I noticed about Sora is that in order to prompt Sora to do something, you actually have to understand cinematography and filmmaking. So you have to understand what a cut looks like, what a shot looks like, what color tone is. The more you know about filmmaking, the better the output because you know how to prompt. So I think these products will actually teach people how to do things like filmmaking and increase the level of art participation. A good example of technology impacting society was in the 1890s when photography was invented. There was a famous photographer, I mean, artist. I can't remember his name, but after he saw the first demonstration of a camera, he wrote an article for the paper saying, "I've enjoyed a wonderful life as an artist. I'm sad to say I've witnessed the death of art." Right? So everybody claims that photography would be the death of art. But if you looked at portrait photography, uh, before portraits cost, the equivalent of $50,000 to do a selfie, right? So it's only for the wealthy. After cameras came out, everybody could get a selfie for like only $100. So they would save up and do it, and expanded the interest in portraiture. And portrait painting actually increased after the invention of photography. I think the same thing will happen with many other things. Human beings are resilient; they'll figure it out. All the entire impressionist art movement was a reaction to photography that said, what's your value of an artist if I can do art better than you? I can faithfully reproduce this photograph. I could faithfully reproduce the scene with the photograph better than you can as a painter. That made the painters all think, what is the meaning of art? Then they actually realized it is the impression of what I see on the human eye and the human brain. So they created impressionism to capture that impression and the feeling of the moment. So I think that there will be a new school of art created, new school of videos, new kinds of filmmaking that will be invented as a result of this, because humans tend to take and augment uh, technologies. And then, and I'll just provide one more long-winded story. I apologize for taking up too much time. My favorite story about how resilient humans are. The most interesting event in the 20th century is actually in 1905, a fellow named Leon Sirpolet won the world speed land record. And he drove 75 miles an hour in something called the Easter egg. It was a kind of an Easter egg shaped car. It was running on steam engine. And when he hit that speed, people were amazed because cars would only go like a few miles an hour. So at 75 miles an hour, this is like a daredevil driver. But if you look today, everybody can drive 75 miles an hour. And many people could do it drinking coffee, and some could do it putting on makeup, right? It's just an unbelievable ability. And it didn't take 100 years for human beings to evolve to be able to drive race cars. All it took was 6 months of driver training and the belief that you can. It's just like running the 6 minute mile. Once you know it's possible, then humans do it. Humans are resilient. They're going to spring back. And you need challenges like AI that impact all of society to give us the opportunity to grow. So I believe that human beings will actually expand as a result of the AI revolution. Thank you. And Senator, I yield my time.
Thank you. Professor Rob, we have two more questions for today's session. One is
Yeah,
in
I can
what
probably
way-
I can probably read that myself. In what ways might AI contribute? Oops, you lost the question over finishing. In what ways might AI contribute to environmental sustainability and addressing global challenges such as climate change? And what's the next question? How could the integration of AI into education through shared learning experiences, the way knowledge is acquired and disseminated? Let's take the second one first. So with regard to AI being used in education, right now, a couple ways. One is to just train people how to work with AI, get comfortable with it, be able to get the outcome that they want with the lowest number of iterations. Because the way we work with AI now is we iterate it. You ask it to do something, it's not right. You ask it to change the thing that wasn't right. It corrects. It may not correct it the way you thought. You keep iterating until the outcome matches what it was you thought. And the fastest way to get to the end point is to train people to think in complete sentences. But to think through things completely, think through the consequential damages of what they're doing. Think about the implications of what it is they're doing. Think about the how what they're doing is going to interact with other things that it's got to work with. All of those have to be considered in the first request. And the closer you can get to the endpoint you want, the faster you can get to the endpoint you want, the better off you're going to be. The other thing you want to use AI to test for is, we need to get people used to change, because in an AI world, nothing's set. I mean, the career that you start with may not be the career you end with as you exit school. So training people how to adjust for change. As a race, we're not good with change. And the older we get, the less good we become. And so part of what we have to train students to be is to be able to flow with change, to be able to shift their view as their environment shifts, so that they're still productive, they're still happy, and they're still capable. If they lock in on a particular career path, and that career path goes away by the time they exit education, they're kind of screwed. And the only way to stop that is they really have to stay connected. They have to stay aware of what's going on in the outside world, and be aware we've always had the issue where people change as they grow. And so often when people have started an educational process, by the time they leave that process, the thing they thought they would enjoy, they don't enjoy anymore. And so you've got that mismatch as well. But the technological mismatch is the bigger thing. So training people using AI through simulations to train people, not only to help them find what they enjoy doing most, but get them comfortable with the fact that they may have to change their goals once, twice, maybe several times as they go through their educational phase. And then again, as they enter their career. The next few decades are going to be decades of massive and very rapid change. So that's how you use AI. And here's the really cool thing about AI, because we can use simulation now. We can put kids in real world situations and allow them to use the knowledge that they're acquiring without the risks they would typically have of doing that in the real world. In other words, you make a mistake in simulation, so what? Really, you're not doing any damage. You can learn from it. Or if you make a mistake in the real world, say an engineering mistake where you underspecify a piece of hardware, or you introduce too much air into the mix or anything, well, whatever you build is probably going to fall apart, and there's a good chance people are going to die. Well, a simulation, you can experiment as much as you want. So it really opens the door with regard to your allowance, let's say your ability to fail successfully. You can fail a lot more with AI than you can, especially with simulation, than you can fail in the real world, just from cost reasons and because of the underlying risk. Now, moving AI to sustainability. As we talk about AI and sustainability, the big project is Earth 2. That's the massive project. That's the project that was specifically developed to measure man's impact on the planet and better predict out weather events. I mean, the kinds of events we're currently having in the States that are catching a lot of people by surprise. The news this morning was about all the people that were whomped by tornadoes that they weren't expecting, knocked over, flipped on the road, and left in really bad situations. With Earth 2, we'll at the very least be able to get faster warning about major weather events, but it also allows us to experiment with the kinds of things we're talking about for weather mitigation. Whether we're talking about introducing metals into the atmosphere, which so far hasn't tested very well, or stratospheric sun blocking elements, which looks, at least on paper, to be more viable. By the way, the reason is if you're going to drop stuff in the atmosphere, you're at the mercy of wind, and the difficulty is the winds up there move quite violently. And so even keeping the stuff together is problematic. And there have been indications that bordering countries that might be doing weather mitigation using atmospheric introductions might consider some of those introductions an act of war if they drift over into their territory. So it's creating some just real iffy things. But again, with simulation, we can work all this stuff out before we ever drop an ounce of material into the atmosphere. And so the kinds of problems we've had in the past, say with cloud seeding, those times where it's worked, where California had to stop it because of the litigation risk, we can do that now. And in theory, we'll be able to do that in simulation and mitigate the downside risk for introducing elements that are actually going to cause weather change events. By the way, in the California event, it's never been clear whether the cloud seeding actually caused the floods, but because they approximated the floods and there was a physical connection, the litigation became problematic. So in the end, with regard to climate change, it's the ability to experiment now in simulation as Earth 2 spins up, test to see in the simulated world whether something works before we actually deploy it in the real world, and then suffer if we guessed wrong with the damage that occurs. And of course, over time, Earth 2 becomes more and more capable of becoming a digital image, a digital twin of the planet, as we roll out thousands and then millions of sensors and monitors, so we can get a real-time sense of the planet. I should add one interesting aspect of Earth 2. Originally, when it was conceived, it was really thought that it was going to require a quantum computer in order to fulfill its mission, but that's no longer on the table. Right now, they're fully convinced they can do it with generative AI. They don't even need AGI yet. That generative AI can be spun up and make that happen. One other element before we pass on, because this is probably going to be my last time around because we're running out of time, is that the one other thing that I'm monitoring right now is the massive drop in cost of creating LLMs. Right now, it's about $100 million to create an LLM. It's a lot of money. Jensen went on stage, I think last week, it might have been the week before last, and indicated that he believes we can get that number down to zero before the end of the decade, and potentially long before the end of the decade. Because once you develop the data sets that train the LLMs, and then you make those data sets available, then the cost of the data and the cost of acquiring the data is built into the system. And what they're doing as a consortium is allowing the sharing of this data across companies so that you're no longer having to pay for the elements once they're created. And that means you should be able to create LLMs, not SLMs, but LLMs for next to zero at a future time. That means we'll be able to spin up ChatGPT level models, GPT-4 level models, and instead of costing $100 million, it's going to be, chump change. That's going to result in an awful lot of LLMs, and it'll just drive the cost out of the segment. Now, much smaller companies can use the technology. Much smaller companies can develop the technology, and creativity is likely to go vertical. So that has a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. On the negative side, weapons, terrorist organizations, criminal organizations. Right now the stuff's too expensive. Well, but we're using it in defense. But the stuff's too expensive for a lot of the organizations we worry about. As the cost drops out of this, though, suddenly it becomes viable for a whole lot of things we don't want people to do. And so my final comment is we really need to start spending up defenses. The underfunded AI shield efforts out of the Lifeboat Foundation and the Sunware effort out of Google aren't going to cut it. We desperately need to spin up AI defenses before we get to the point that these things are so cheap. Little Johnny in his bedroom is going to be able to create one. And we've seen little Johnny problems before with malware. What little Johnny is going to be able to do with his own LLM, his or her LLM, it could be a true nightmare. We've had a lot of problems with malware, even government malware jumping the rails. I recall the malware that escaped from Iran a few years back. We get AIs acting like this. The amount of damage they can do is going to be significant. So we really need to spin up efforts like Deep Instinct out of Israel that are working specifically at AI defenses that can operate at machine speeds and may be able to mitigate some of the hostile AIs we're going to see in the future that will be operating at machine speeds. And then that's probably going to be it for me because we're almost out of time.
Thank you, Professor Sheridan.
Okay, let's see. I agree. All of the above is going to happen. It's going to happen better, faster, and cheaper. So we just have to learn fast. As the careers, I've already done 13 career changes in my life, 2 major ones. All right, from urban planning to project financing to semiconductors. And then within technology, every generation, every 2 or 3 years, I have to learn a brand new technology or series, and it's getting more complex. So lesson, be a perpetual students, learn as fast as you can and use AI because it's easier, faster to use AI to learn quickly, all the basics. Then you can move on. That's one. The second is I'm an urban planner. And ultimately, we start in reality, whether it's medicine or cities. And right now, it's a shit show in many of the cities around the world and in the many poor areas. So we say that, and our goal is to take the shit show, and I call it hell or inferno in Dante's, and then to use the digital twins using VR and AI to develop your paradise, and then go about and plan together, iterate it, and then build it. But it's an iterative process of improving the city. So the ultimate test for VR and AR for climate change or even local or medicine or anything is how we'll improve our communities and our families and our lives. That's the ultimate test. And it's not going to be one person government to do it. It will be people on the ground, individuals. And I agree everything. It's some kid is gonna be the one or be the future city planners, and they're gonna be able to. They could do it today with Unreal. They could, and Unity. They could show you this beautiful community, which is a slum right now. They could do it in 1 or 2 days, actually. So I think we're going to see some really exciting innovations and breakthroughs in thinking and learning. And one thing I wanted to pass is that we call it the 100 monkey phenomena, right? So everybody's a monkey, they're dumb. And then one person runs the 4-minute mile, and guess what? Before you know it, all 100 monkeys are saying we can do 4-minute mile too, and they actually go out and do it. So humans evolved very quickly by social learning. And that's why we will survive, because when it happens, everybody copies the best practices. We said, I want to be like them. And also the worst practices, but we stop those. So I think in that sense, entrepreneurship, learning fast, using AI to learn as fast as you can, and then working together as a team, I think we could solve pretty much any problem we want. It's just a matter of putting our minds together. But I don't think humans are going to roll over and play dead. I think, as we've seen in history, whenever there's a collapse after World War I and II and III or whatever, we have to rebuild our societies, and I think the same thing's going to happen again and again and again. So I'm rather optimistic in that sense, and I agree with Moses, is that resilience will define everybody forever, unless we want to just roll over and play dead. But I don't think humans will ever want to give up, not when they can make changes, and we've done it in the past.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Donald.
Will humans will survive? It's getting from here to there that's kind of a problem, because right now things, if you look, it's not just the United States, but all over the world, we're getting more and more authoritarian governments. And I just read an interesting social psychology study that showed that the more income inequality there was, the less trust people had in institutions. And there's a really interesting article in The Economist showing that the belief in the institutions in the United States was declining at an incredible rate. And institutions are kind of unconscious agreements that we have to create social objects like governments and legal systems and all those kinds of things. And if we don't believe in them, we have to believe in them for them to exist. And so there's one of the difficulties with AI is it's been so easy to simulate things that look like real life. So I've been reading a lot about fake news. There's a great article in The Economist about it this week. And the difficulty of identifying something that's it's pretty high, because you think yourself, it's hard sometimes to know if something's true or not. How do you decide that? You read some wild thing in the, some wild headline someplace, and my immediate response is, I don't really believe this. I'm going to go look at 5 or 6 different places, because if this was true, many people would be talking about it. And when I find that it's only Fox News or something that's saying that, I just completely disregard it. So it's the thing that Sheridan's talking about, the social aspect of it that concerns me most, is that how we're going to get to there, from here to there, is going to require cooperation. And the world's moving towards less cooperation instead of more cooperation right now, which is at a very turbulent time, which is very concerning to me. I'm working now with a company, and what the company did was make training for CAD CAM systems, and they do pretty well. They're expanding into what we're doing. He wanted me to be part of this. We're using 3D printers to teach kids to make things and become entrepreneurs in a simulated environment. And our belief is that, just like everyone on this panel said, is that if people can be if you're entrepreneurial, you can make stuff. And so as far as the economic aspects of this are going, if you go to TikTok now, you'll see dozens and dozens of people who've taken ChatGPT and put basically apps in front of it that generate the prompts so that you can have it do something for a special purpose. Like, all it does is write a resume and cover letter. That's it. But you don't have to figure out the prompts to do it, because it just queries you for enough information to create the prompts itself and allows you to do that. So they're selling that. It's a special thing there. And there's dozens of different things like that people are doing. So entrepreneur is a great thing. I mean, it's when people just look at the change and they figure out how to make it be to their advantage. I do want to address the idea about artists, and I will point out that I was in a band with a woman. She passed away at 101 years old, and she let me be in her band. She'd been playing music since she was 16 years old, and she was born in 1915 or something like that. And she said, when I was a kid, if you wanted to have music at a party, you hired musicians. And so people could make a living being a musician. Like, you could, regular people, people who weren't superstars could make a living being a musician. And TikTok and things like that have been helpful for people so that they can get out and market themselves. But the percentage of society that are musicians is very small relative to the way it was before they invented recording devices. And long playing records especially wiped out the big bands in just a matter of years. It was just, they were there and then they weren't. And so those things are not economically viable anymore. But it gets replaced with new things. So it's all good. But again, I go back, like anybody personally, the most important thing you can do is learn not to be judgmental, have an open mind, learn from everybody, because everybody knows something you don't, and they can teach you something. And keep an entrepreneurial spirit and the confidence that you'll be able to make something out of something, or help somebody who's doing it. I mean, sometimes you need a team. You need a finance person and a marketing person and all those different things to be successful. But I still think that there's stopping a problem and then dealing with the problem after it's happened, mitigation. Or if a problem is going to happen, you can prepare yourself for that problem so that when it happens, it's not as bad. And so right now, I think that kind of the most interesting and exciting thing to help the human race is to try and understand the fact that there are starting to be massive population migrations, and the Earth isn't going to be the same in 50 years. And so trying to understand that and trying to figure out what you personally can do about that is an incredibly valuable and important thing to do. So I think human race will stay around. It's just there won't be as many of us.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Thank you, Mr. Moses Ma, Mr. Rob, and Mr. Sheridan Tatsuno for joining today's session. This is an excellent record. I request all of our audience, please share our content as much as possible. Besides that, we are launching our academy, and we are working with different universities, grant commissions, and school and college, especially corporations. So those who are interested to join World Talent Economy Forum, you can join as a fellow, as a trainer, as a researcher, and definitely we can solve many complex problems of emerging economy. So thank you for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye.
Bye.